types of things like this participate. That's a benefit. You know, everyone in here, as Hal pointed out when we got started, is either a veteran or a family member of veterans. By virtue that you're in that select group, that's a benefit. Take advantage. The only way to really make this happen, whether you go to job boards or any of that stuff, it's all relationship based, because at the end of the day, you still have to get out there and leverage those relationships. And the way to do it is take advantage of the benefit that's inherent in your status as a veteran.
David, I'll ask you, because how many years did you have active duty?
20.
20, okay. A few more than me. So I'll ask you this question. When you entered into the first civ div, right, how long did it take you to become comfortable in the civilian setting to face the normal day-to-day military setting? Like, what were some of the changes that you went through?
Sure. It probably took a couple of years, I'd say, just kind of getting. It felt like I was coming straight out of college in my first job, because all these people had terminology down. They knew the difference, ROI, RO this, RO that. And I was like, wow, what does all this stuff mean? It was kind of learning a whole new language coming from military to civilian corporate world. And, you know, I was competing against a lot younger people. Luckily, I look kind of young when I got out of the military, so it kind of helped. But I was in the job market with people that were getting out of college. So it took a while to kind of get my rhythm going and understand the lingo, communicate effectively with them. And you didn't ask this question, but I kind of want to throw this out there as well. You know, one of the biggest challenges that I face, and I think a lot of veterans face, is when you first go in for that interview, the person that interviews you is probably not going to be a veteran. Okay, and so they have your resume in front of them, and they see that you have what they want, your leadership ability and all that great stuff, but you're in the military, and they really don't relate to you that well because they didn't serve. And a lot of times they can be intimidated by the fact that you were in the military. They have a stereotype of you. They think you're robotic. They think you're not a team player per se. You're very don't think outside the box. So they have a lot of perceptions about you. And my biggest challenge when I go into interviews, like when I used to go into interviews, was I had to break those walls down and let them know, hey, I'm just like you. I can talk the language. I'm articulate, intelligent. I can be part of your team. So, and you kind of sit in the face. They start relaxing with you, and it's kind of like then they can bond. Because interview is all about bonding. It's not about necessarily what you know. It's about how you can articulate yourself, to answer the questions, and make the interviewer feel like they could really work with you. Because that's what it's going to come down to. Your education and your experience will speak for itself, but you have to have that bond with the person, the hiring manager, in order for them to hire you.
What's the quickest way to create that bond? Anybody know? And it's tough for me because I'm a Marine. You gotta smile. It's tough. You walk into the interview, you gotta smile. It's a great point because that transition period, it's different for everybody too. Whether you're an E3 or an 06, you're leaving active duty, you're transitioning. You're making a move into a civilian career. You're going to experience some things that are foreign to you. And I always kind of joke that, the Air Force guys, they're good the next day, right? You make the transition.
Not necessarily. Wasn't that easy.
Some of the Navy guys may take a few months, the Army a year or two, and the Marines, you never guys. So you do have to realize that you are going to have to change a little bit of your behavior. And a lot of times it's going to be frustrating because you're going to think, what's wrong with all these people? You're really going to sit there and say, what's wrong with these people? I'll tell you the first time it hit me, my first job, when I left the Marine Corps, I was doing medical device sales. I was covering 3 states, and we had a sales meeting after about 6 months on the job, and our homework to come to that meeting was we had to list out our prospects and our pipeline, and who we were calling on, what we were doing, where we were in the pipeline, typical sales stuff, right? So I listed mine out. I had 30 or so accounts in there, hospitals, doctors, listed out, notes on what stage of the sales cycle I was in. I walk in, and about 5 minutes into my presentation in front of the group, and my sales manager looks at me and goes, no, stop. Just stop. I was like, no, okay. check myself. He said, no, enough of the fluff, tell us what you really have. And I said, well, this is what I have. My immediate response was, this guy's questioning my integrity, right? Because I was so hardcore on my values that I got angry. I mean, I got angry. So in reality, in the business world, what he wanted to know was, what are you going to close in the next 30 days? Not what's 6 months down the road. So that's just a quick little snippet of some of the transition elements that folks go through. So you employers out there, remember that, and you potential employees, be a little bit flexible. Guys, what I'd like to do at this point is kind of open it up, see if we've got some questions from the floor, if we have any. Go ahead.
Even when you go through your tour in the military, you're going to get a lot of leadership training, whether you're a junior enlisted guy all the way up to general officer or something like that. And it seems that the military says leadership, 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 but most jobs right out of the military are not leadership jobs. You know, you're going to be a salesperson, or you're going to work in an office or something like that. And so, if you were used to leading people, whether you were an NCO or an officer or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden you're out and you're at the bottom of the stack again, how do you guys recommend that veterans take that? You know, the general had a lot of nice things to say about leadership, but a lot of people's first job won't be in charge of anyone. You get some colonel that is used to commanding hundreds of people, and then now he has to transition into civilian life, and he doesn't have anyone working for him. He's at the bottom. So how do you see working with?
Anybody want to jump in? Go ahead.
So I'll say this. I think it's a great question. I think that leads off of what we were just talking about. And I would say this: you start with the end in mind first. What that means is, I think of anybody in this room, including any of us up here, General's probably the only one that could walk from his position in the Army into a position in the civilian world, probably a bigger position in the civilian world. Maybe there are a few exceptions. It doesn't happen all too often, right? There's a little bank in I live in San Antonio, Texas. There's a little bank financial institution out there called USVA. And I'm sure you guys have heard of it. And
Just a little.
I meet so many people there all the time. I'm not kidding you. 05s, 04s, 06s are sitting in the call center. These guys are ones that had command at sea buttons, which in the Navy terms is like, that's all powerful, all God is command at sea. And these guys are sitting in the call center making $20 an hour, taking my insurance call, telling them I need insurance help. These guys are putting in their time so they can get to that, climb to that ladder, climb to that position. So my point with that story is, I wouldn't do it as well. You get out in service and you got all these great experiences, you got leadership, you can do anything you set your mind to, and all the training that you have, and you get out and you're like, oh crap, I gotta start at the bottom. And it took me a couple of years to realize that, but then you figure that out, and you have an objective of where you want to go, just like our objectives in the military, whatever it is our mission is that day. And you get the training you need, you get the education you need, you set out for those goals, and you do it by making strategic moves. And you take everything that you've done in the military, and you utilize that so you can be a superstar. Because getting promoted in the military is kind of similar to getting promoted in the civilian world. There's a little bit more politics you go in the civilian world, but it's going to be on superstars, and it's going to be about getting recognized, and it's going to be about standing out. You have to get yourself promoted by going to a recruiter. If you're not getting promoted internally, you're looking for another opportunity, you do such. But as long as you stand out and you look for those opportunities, but you recognize that you got to start at a certain level, that you can work yourself up. I get college kids all the time that will come to me in Morgan, I want to be the CFO of the company. It's like, really, we're a freaking $8 billion company, you're going to be the CFO? You know, I get people right out of the military, you know, that, well, I was an E4 and led platoon of grunts, and I did this and did that, or I was an 01 or 02 or whatever. Well, that's great, but it doesn't work out here like this. You got to earn your place, you got to start your keep, and you got to work your way up.
And I'll add that leadership, and a lot of civilian workforce, non-former military folks, don't recognize the difference between leadership and management. So many times throughout my professional career, I've heard the two terms used as if they're synonyms, and every time I hear it, I stop. A lot of times for guys coming out that are looking for that initial position, you got to determine yourself. Do I want to get into a leadership role? Because that's a different track than I want to get into a results role, like a sales role. So you got to put yourself on the right track, because you lead people, you manage assets, and you got to be on the right track to get in the right role.
In my business, I'm on the next panel. I'll talk a little bit about this more later. But to your question over there, the thing I think that military people have better than leadership is followership. I'm probably 20 years older than a lot of folks in my office, and they come to me all the time and wonder how I'm able to, to stay in the lane. And you get hired for your leadership potential, but you get promoted because your ability to play a team player and be a follower. And so it's much more difficult to do that. And I think in the military, we probably learned how to be followers after we learned how to be leaders. And so the people who get promoted and are successful in that general and all that, they were able to conform and be a follower. So people come to me all the time often and say, well, how can you stay in your lane and not tell the boss what to do all the time? It's because I learned how to lead and I learned how to follow in the military. So I think that's a selling point that you have that you need to take advantage of. Because a lot of people don't know how to do that.
Yes.
I get asked a lot from people who are looking for jobs, and it's very competitive out there. And I agree with what Morgan said, which is the phone-ish networking in general is your #1 asset to get that job. But today we live in a world where resumes are submitted online or they're dropped off at a front desk, and you can't make that connection. So as recruiters or people that are in this field, what advice do I give others to help them bypass that wall that does exist? It's very real, because people are inundated with overwhelming amount of applicants, quality applicants. So how does that piece of paper, how does that resume set a veteran, and not just, hey, I was in the Army. I'm talking specific techniques, not the piece of paper, to get that interview, to get that call, to make that connection, because I get it asked all the time.
Okay, I'll take this one. My name is Derek Miller, and that's a great question. And you need to have a game plan ultimately. And there is an HR black hole. You see positions posted online, and you send your resume. I've never heard anything. Well, there's a proactive approach, and it's kind of what we do as recruiters or HR professionals, or however you want to slice it, that ultimately you're in charge of your search. Your search isn't in charge of you. So by taking that approach, you grab the book of lists, you grab the business journals, you figure out within the discipline that you work, whatever your background's in, say it's in finance. Well, what company do I want to work at? Which company do I want to take a look at, and I know they're the top 100 companies to work for in my metro area, or I know they're growing rapidly, or there's a reason that you want to join that company. And in this day and age, with LinkedIn, with Google, with company websites, if you're looking, say, for a financial analyst position, so now I need to figure out who the finance manager is, because ultimately that finance manager is going to be bringing on that financial analyst. Just giving you an example. So I would go on LinkedIn. I want to join an ABC company, and then finance. So I'll see if maybe an assistant finance manager for that company or a finance manager for that company. And then I would send my resume directly to that person with a little opening. I would also call and leave a message if you don't get them on the phone. And all you're doing is selling yourself. There's a silent HR market out there where some companies never even put positions posted on job board, the Monster, Craigslist, and they'll have an open position that's down the pipe or down the road. And by taking maybe 10 companies that you're really interested in, following up with these 10 companies, figuring out who decision makers within these companies are, try the assistant finance manager, try the finance manager, try the accounting manager, try HR. Come in from 20 different ways, back door, front door, chimney, and you try to get your information to the right people. And then from there, create your own interview. If you get them on the phone, I emailed you a little while ago. Is there any way you have a moment? Can you bring that up real quick and talk to them real quick? They don't have all day, and a lot of times you're not going to. It's not going to happen immediately. It takes effort, time, energy to do this. But if you get them on the phone, you can, and if you saw a job description or if you know what type of people they look for, hone in on that. My last position, save, made, and achieved. What did you do differently? You saved the company $400,000 by being involved in an audit, and you found a supplier that you all were working with, you paid them too much. You achieved 3 promotions since with the company. So I would just, real quick, grab a couple, sizzle points of what identifies you or makes you different. And if you're talking to them and you have their resume up and you have them on the phone, you bring those sizzles up, they see it. Is there anything you're currently working on or something I could possibly help with?
One other thing to do, strategy-wise, is, and you touched on it as well, is don't take the shotgun approach. If somebody's looking for a position and they spent 5 hours a night before submitting the resume to 500 different jobs on a job board, you're going to get shotgun results. Nothing. So pick 10 or so companies, target those different avenues of approach within those companies, like you said, and guys, keep track of who you sent your resume to. That's the one thing I tell these folks. You don't know how many times I've had, when I still had a recruiting company, I would have companies call me back and say, hey, you know what, Brian, you sent me your resume 30 days ago. Sometimes it takes that long for them to get to it. So, we don't move at military pace. You sent me a candidate 30 days ago, I picked up the phone, I called him, and when he answered the phone, he said, what company? With who? Make sure you tell your folks that are looking for jobs. Keep a little Excel spreadsheet with you. If you're really good on your smartphone, keep them all listed on your smartphone, plug them in, so when that person calls, you know who they are, you can reference something you know about them personally. If your spouse is at home and answering your home phone and that's the number you're using, make sure they know that you're interviewing. Make sure they know you're going to potentially move across country. I can tell you some funny stories, but we'll save that for the social hour. That one right here.
Well, Gene, go first. Without a question, it's more a suggestion. But the suggestion is get in front of as many people as possible.
Face to face.
Because that's where the decision's gonna get made when they see you. All the other stuff is nice to have, but the decision's gonna be made when people see you.
It is frustrating as all get up, these websites, it's resume.
I got an
You spend actually your whole time just doing that, finding these companies, whatever, putting resume out there. It's tough.
Well, the reason, there's a lot of things behind the website. So like for our company, as an example, we have to be compliant. So we're government contractors and we're FCC government. So it's compliance, we have to get EO information and things like that. Your question, was that directed like specifically for vets, like vets that come to you?
It's, I own a couple companies, so I get resumes a lot,
Yeah.
and it's the resume on the white sheet of paper syndrome. And when you're a vet, or really with anyone, but because it's a vet, I want to talk about that. It's you can make a connection, and I understand that, and I tell people that's what you got to do to get in.
Right.
But when you're competing in a system where it is based off of web submissions or it's a paper resume landing, let me give an example of what I'm talking about and some recommendations that I gave. I told one guy who's an attorney friend of mine who's trying to get a job with Carnival, and I told him to mail him a chest. And I'm not talking about a regular chest, I'm talking about a chest this big. And I said, because there's hundreds of resumes that's going in. I said, you mail them a big chest with your resume inside, and you say, I'm the treasure you've been looking for. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, and that's what I want to hear from you guys. When you're thinking about this stuff, it's a tough world. You gotta think big. And I'm sure you guys know of stories like this, and that's what I want us to talk about.
You also got to know your target market too. That might work with somebody.
Yeah.
Like
It might,
a
but it might not.
500 company that's blue coat, red tie.
They call it security.
Yeah, exactly.
But I've got a potential solution for that online application hole. Because when you submit your resume online, they'll use OCR software to kind of grade your resume. Go ahead at the top of your resume, insert every single keyword and key phrase. If you can, fill in the entire job description. then shrink it down to 1-point font, and then paint the font white. It's like knowing your enemy.
There's certain applications where that works, and I know that's a technique, and that will work. There's certain applications.
Remember, you're
For certain job board aggregators that do use OCS scanning software, yeah, let's talk about that later. Now, you have to know as a candidate, when you submit your resume, is this going to an inbox and somebody's going to look at it, or is it going to a scanner that's going to look for keywords? So you might not know that, but yeah, that's a.
Well, at the end of the day, it comes up. At the end of the day, if it goes in black hole, the bottom line is somebody's looking at it. The bottom line is you have to be qualified, you have to have the skills, and you have to have the tenure and everything the hiring manager wants. That's the bottom line.
And you
You're not
have to
qualified.
use your network.
Yeah, you're not qualified, you're not qualified. So to answer your question real quick, I really don't care if it goes to Fortune 500. I think you should be creative. I think you should think out of the box. I think you need to do whatever is necessary to get yourself in front of the hiring person. I bypass the entire situation just like I did when I recruited. I don't deal with HR. I go bypass the entire situation. And I'll give you a real world example real quick. I don't say this to brag whatsoever. I lived here in St. Petersburg and I wanted to work for the Delaware. What I did is I went on there and I sent resume, and guess what I got? Goose egg, right? I got online and I found out that the senior vice president of human relations was actually a retired command master sergeant in the Air Force. And somebody made that point earlier about knowing somebody in your network. I sent the guy a nice letter. I didn't send him a resume and let him know that, I'm trying to get a job. I sent him a letter asking him how he got into sports, because I wanted to do the same thing. Can you spend 15 minutes with me? I'm going to call you next week and follow up. We played a couple phone tag. Next thing I know, I was in left field at the Tropicana Park here, sitting with him in a game, and talking to him about how he got into sports, and he offered me a job on the spot. I got lucky, but the whole thing is, though, I put myself in that situation by taking a chance and taking a risk and going out of my comfort zone at that same point. If I can do it, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. There's probably tons of people smarter than me. You guys can do it too. You just got to be creative. You got to think out of the box, just like you did in the service.
I'm on the development panel, but I'd like y'all to give yourself some recognition and a pat on the back in that you all have had tremendous experience in working for the team, working for the unit, sacrificing yourself for the team or the unit. Civilian world doesn't know anything about that.
True.
And your objective it needs to be get in front of that man. You use this networking through Connected Network. The Veterans Network is far better than going to BNI in the afternoon and passing cards around. That's a waste of time. But the Veterans Network is meaningful because they know what you've been through. And then you get in front of that man and you say, I have a postgraduate degree in teamwork. I want to be on your team. And then now you've made yourself different from every other applicant because, yeah, he's going to look for qualifications and he's going to look for experience and he's got 10 resumes that have all that. Well, you're going to be the guy who looks him in the eye and says, I want to be on your team and I know how to do that.
Employers, the good employers, I mean, some are still stuck in the rut, but most have figured it out by now. They don't hire based off of, a certain qualification. There's some regulatory things, if you're going to be selling securities, you got to have a license. But you know what, employers are taught to hire attitude, train the competencies. And if you've got the right attitude, and you can package yourself and talk about your skills and experiences and how you've got that pattern of behavior that will predict your future performance, you're gonna be successful.
Right. And maybe someone is going to ask this question. I know most of the questions have been focused on getting your foot in the door, but that's only the first part of the marathon right there. Once you get your foot in the door, I have so many people that get their feet in the door, and they come in and they snatch, the feet from the jaws of victory because you come into that interview, then what? And perhaps folks will ask the question, which will provide a segue to kind of talk about the experiences. But okay, you get in the door. Your resume tells me about features. It tells us about features, where I went to school, what I did, all that type of stuff. But as they say in the sales business, features sell, benefits tell. All right, or probably I got that backwards. Features tell, benefits sell. All right, so I can know what your features are, but I need to know how your skill set is going to benefit my organization. Now, in order for me to understand that, there's a condition precedent for that. That is for you to know what I'm looking for as an organization. The biggest thing that I see when people actually get inside the door and when they again snatch, defeat from the jaws of victory, they come in and they know absolutely nothing about your organization other than what they read in the job description. For a public company, in the public sector, there are tons of pieces of information. There are board minutes, there are all kinds of stuff. On the private sector side, there are 10Ks, there are all kinds of stuff. The bottom line, what you guys are all hearing from us is you have to conduct your own business intelligence. You have to do the hard work. There's nothing whatsoever that is going to replace the hard work, and it's just like anything else. One of the things, the chest with the resume, that's called marketing. It's marketing yourself. Doing the business intelligence, conducting the due diligence, finding out about that employer instead of shotgunning it out. Because guess what? If you shotgun it out and I call you in for an interview, or any one of these guys call you in for an interview, and you don't have the foggiest idea about my company, you say, well, thank you, we will be in touch pretty soon. That's what's going to happen. So, just know your audience, conduct the due diligence, and then market yourself everything to that end. Like Morgan said, have the end in mind.
Yes, I want to get one more question also.
I'm on the entrepreneurship panel, so get ready for the rebel section later on. But I just wanted to kind of piggyback, because one thing I'm not hearing, I'm straight cutting edge, okay, always on the front end of what's going on. And I heard a little laughter and stuff like what he was saying about changing the font size and all that. It's not just for OCR software, it's for Google. Because the fact of the matter is, most jobs out there don't even reach these guys. Okay, they're looking for certain keywords and they're looking to screen you out before you ever even get in the ball game. Okay, so things like what he's talking about, they are very important because you have to come up in that search. Because the first thing that's going to happen when they go to LinkedIn or whatever and they get interested in you, the first thing you're going to do is the first thing you would do when you're looking at a partner to go on a date with. They're going to Google you. And if you don't show up on page 1 of Google, what you just told them is you don't understand the technology. That's the first thing a lot of these employers want to know, is do you understand how to use the technology? And if you can show up on page 1 of Google, you just answered that question for them.
That's a great point, and it leads into building your personal social brand. Now that concept is, you say you're on the edge. Building your personal social brand, it's tough for military folks to get their arms around because we are taught, hey, let's keep all our secrets, loose lips, ships, that type of thing. So we keep all our information private. If we have a Facebook page, we don't let it connect to anybody else. But when you go to the job hunt, you got to have your LinkedIn. You got to know what your personal brand is.
That's right.
And if you don't convincingly just share to a potential employer what your brand is, what you're about, then moving on to the next one.
Right. Who are you?
Companies want intelligence, they want attitude, and they want energy.
I'm bursting to get this out because you reminded me real quick. When you suggested going on LinkedIn, which by the way, all the people I coach, LinkedIn is where you start. Everything else is playtime. LinkedIn is where the real deal is going on. And when you said go to the company and find the account representative, the managers and all that sort of thing, before you send them a resume, invite them to your network.
Good point.
Okay? Because if they're in your network, guess what? You can email them all you want. And you're already in. You don't have to get referred or introduced by somebody else. And plus, they already feel like they know you because they see your picture staring at them as soon as they come up on your profile. Okay? Get them in your network, and you're halfway through.
That's great. And guys, I appreciate it. And, we're going to sum up now, and I know we kind of went all over the map here. You have an idea of where it's going to go, and then the conversation, we get some good topics. But we hit on a few different things. We hit on what we call sourcing, finding those companies. We briefly hit on some interviewing techniques, and we talked a little bit about development. We have a panel on that as well. Myself and some of the other panel members, we're going to be available later on in the afternoon. We can take any of those questions one-on-one. Appreciate your inputs. Let's get a round of applause for our panel. All right, thanks, folks. Really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, and you should have a bunch of recruiters in your LinkedIn network too.
Hey, real quick, guys, I just want to say something real quick. I call a lot of you veterans here, and I know you're all looking for jobs out here. Please please change your phone messages. I don't need to hear, yo, yo, leave a message, I'm out. I'm not gonna call you again. You're definitely out. So change your phone message, make it very professional.